Hello and welcome to my series DevSecOps. My name is Sven Ruppert and I will explain you in this part of the series why true independency is very important for DevSecOps. If you're interested in this, stay tuned. DevSecOps and being independent from the outside. Why is this important? If you're looking at the history that what's happened during the last few months or during the last year, let's assume that you're building software and you want to have a stable production line. You have to support for a long time LTS versions for your customers. Then you must be able to have all parts of your production line available every time over this time you are serving services or products to your customers. What happened? So, for example, since a longer time we have now short cycles for the JDKs. If your project depends on Java and you're reliable or you're relying on the JDK itself, you must make sure that the JDK you're using is always available. For the long-term support versions of the JDK, maybe every version will be available, but what is with the build numbers? So you have a JDK 8 build number 172 and through 2, 3, whatever. So what happened if you really need exactly one dedicated JDK? Normally you would say you're just downloading it and you assume that this JDK will be available. It was long time like this, so we had the availability of a JDK guaranteed more or less. But now we have different vendors, we have different ways how these vendors are dealing with Mino versions and how long they are offering JDK downloads. So for this, it would be perfect if you're just grabbing the JDK you need for all platforms you have to deal with and then storing this binary inside your network so that your production line is not failing because you just not have this JDK anymore, for example. Another thing is, if you're working with Java and you're using Maven or Gradle, you are depending more or less on Maven Central. But the owner of Maven Central is now a different one. So this company was bought by another company, and what their strategy will be, we don't know. I have no idea what will happen during the next 2 or 3 years. So everything that's inside this Maven Central, will it be available? Are they supporting to store all old versions or whatever? Just as an idea, a few weeks ago, from the point of time I created this video, Docker Hub announced a new policy. So since a long time it was more or less normal that you can push as much as you want Docker images to Docker Hub, and there it was just stored indefinitely. So it means if you're building your own Docker images, you're publishing them for free, for example, or you're relying on open source Docker images because your Docker images are built on top of them, then it was more or less guaranteed that these Docker images will be available every time, everywhere. So it was just no question, it will be there. But now the policy changed, so every inactive Docker image will be, I think, deleted after 6 months or whatever, and maybe it will change in the future. So if your whole infrastructure, so your infrastructure, your build pipeline, so your product, whatever, is based on some of these base images, it is a good idea to hold these base images as well inside your own infrastructure. The same with everything what you're using. So if you're looking at some typical developer stacks, let's say you're in the cloud native world, or you have just a monolith or whatever, it doesn't count. So if you have an architecture A or B, because it's mostly the same. So if you have, for example, an application and then you need, for example, Maven repository for it. If you're wrapping it in Linux because you want to go to Docker, then you need Debian repositories for it. Again, Debian repositories are hosted from some parties, mostly universities. If they have money for the next 10 years to host every version you are expecting, nobody knows. Docker, I just mentioned it, so the Docker images are now within different lifetime policy. And last but not least, the Kubernetes universe. So if you're relying on some Helm charts that are offered from some third parties. The same is if you're using DevOps or DevSecOps, the whole tooling, what you need for your developer chain, you need some kind of repository. For example, just a generic one. So what I want to say here is that every step, every single layer in your development process is just relying on some kind of public available repository. If it is a Maven one, if it is a Helm chart one, if it is a Debian one, or if it is just a plain download. You need something that will help you here immediately. Normally you would say, I'm grabbing the stuff from the internet and then I'm consuming it. If you need it a few times, you're just downloading it a few times. But think about some kind of caching. So a long time ago, during the time the bandwidth was not so good, it was very common approach to store stuff, so to cache stuff locally. So you had this query to cache websites, you had FTP cache or whatever, some kind of cache. But I think it's time to think about this one again for mission critical components, and this means everything you need for your development cycle. So everything you're grabbing from the internet, you have to store somewhere. And one product that fits to this very well for the developer side is Artifactory, because then you have one logical unit that is able to deal with all different kinds of dependency management systems or repository types. So the next thing is, if you have this one and you have this store somewhere, why this has something to do with DevSecOps. DevSecOps in terms of reliability, to guarantee that everything will be fully functional every time, means that you're holding everything in your own infrastructure or somewhere what you can control. The next thing is the security part. Everything you're grabbing from the internet must be scanned. So the next part would be just holding an Artifactory with all the repositories to store the binaries, and with X-Ray you're connecting to scan all binaries just to make sure that you don't have compromised ones. If you want to try out this by yourself, we have a free tier, so you can check out how you can use Artifactory in combination with X-Ray, for example, for exactly this one, to hold all this stuff for yourself and build a pipeline based on this infrastructure. So just check out my tutorial about free tier activation. It's here on YouTube as well. And otherwise, if you have any questions or comment, just down to the comment section here to this video, ping me via Twitter. And if you like this one, I would appreciate to get a thumbs up and a subscription from you. So I have a few more topics coming soon, so stay tuned.